Good evening, boys and girls. It is Cyber Afternoon or Evening Monday, and it's also Martin Luther King Day in the United States. So, today I'm going to be talking to you about feelings and what the function and purpose of feeling is. So, the way that I look at it, I consider that we have an emotional body and a physical body, and both are capable and supposed to have feelings. So we have nerve endings in our physical body, and we also have nerve endings in our emotional body. And when you go outside, you might feel cold, or you might feel hot, or you might feel pain, and all of these are functional. So if you go outside and you're cold, it's your body's way of signaling to you that you need to regulate your body temperature, or if you're hot, the same reason. If you're feeling pain, it may be an indication that something's wrong, or it may not, but there's different kinds and levels of pain. And the reality is, the way that we react to feelings makes them either tolerable or pleasurable or intense, and that is the same with emotional feelings. So with a physical feeling, if I go for a run, for example, I'm a long distance runner, so let's say that I'm running for a few hours and I start to feel a sharp pain in my joint. That may be an indication that I have an injury and that I need to stop. On the other hand, I may have a fatigued feeling of pain, that my legs, my muscles are just cramped and tight. And psychologically, if I give into it and start to break down and tense up, it becomes worse and I'm not able to complete the race. Where if I relax and be calm and just say, okay, this is not a feeling of warning me that something's wrong. This is just a feeling of fatigue. Then usually you break through a wall and you get to a certain point and you say, hey, I've made that part, I know I can make the next part, or I know I can make it to the end, and suddenly your body releases these endorphins, and it's not that it completely goes away, but your body compensates somehow, and you don't feel it quite as much, and you receive this burst of energy and you can get through it. And so that is by runners called hitting a wall and running through the wall. And the same things happens with emotions. And a lot of times we hit an emotional wall, and sometimes some people refer to it as riding an emotional wave, that you hit the top of the wave, or you go up to the top and it's intense and uncomfortable, and then once you get to the top of it, you get like this burst of endorphins, and it's like suddenly, hey, I can get through this, and then it comes back down in intensity. And that's normal for emotional pain, and emotions can both serve us, and they can be a warning to us or tell us something that is okay or right, or they can, if they rule over us, then they can also inhibit us, just like hitting a wall and running. If I were to give in to that every time, then there were several races that I would never complete. On the other hand, if I ignored true injury warnings, then I could incapacitate myself for several months or permanently. And so there's a difference, and the same with emotions. For example, if you're in an abusive situation, then to continue to be a part of the abuse cycle is going to bring up a ton of emotions. And when you stay in that, eventually you'll shut down, just like in an injury. You'll shut it out, but it'll come back up later, and it will cause permanent or long-term damage that's very difficult to heal from. And with an eating disorder, the same thing happens, because we may have experienced trauma in the past, or we may have learned to shut down our emotions instead of riding that emotional wave. And when we do that, then it leads to emotional damage. Because just like if you go outside in the cold and you're not prepared for the weather, you can experience frostbite, when you experience frostbite, you can lose nerve sensations that may never come back, or they may come back after a long period of time. Or a lot of people have experienced just going out, becoming cold, and they're just so cold that they can't move their hands, or their hands are just numb. And that's kind of what happens with our emotions when we shut them out with our eating disorders and with our feelings, is we become, it's like going out the cold, shutting them down and becoming numb. And what happens to your hands when you come in the house and they start to warm up? And I hate it when they've been like so cold and they start to warm up, then you have that burning feeling of the nerves waking up, and it's just, they're itchy, burning, there's nothing you can do about it, and it's horrible. I hate it. And that is, I think, how I compare what it felt like for me coming out of eating disordered, blocking out of emotions, that you do it for so long, you become numb to what's really going on. And it's not that it's not happening, it's not that the cold's not there and it's not doing its damage, it is, but you're numbing it out, and long term that's going to cause more problems. And it's the same for an eating disorder. You're numbing it out in the moment, but underneath you're still experiencing all that nerve damage, all that cold, all that pain, and you may not be feeling it, right up here on this level in the moment, but it's damaging your spirit, your emotional center, and your ability to emotionally grow and develop. And I would say, in fact, that many of us who have eating disorders, when we start to go through the recovery process, we find that we emotionally have not developed to our full capacity because of our eating disorder. I know that was true for me because, I'd had an eating disorder all through high school, and during that time, when people who learn to adjust, not normal is not the right word, but positively to issues of self-esteem and figuring out identity, they're able to emotionally grow during that time, that by the time that they finally figured that out, they're emotionally mature. And when you have an eating disorder, or you find maladaptive ways of coping, you stop that growth and that emotional maturing process. It makes it much more difficult when you've moved from, okay, we have this pre-high school or whatever age you developed your eating disorder, could be in college, it even could be later in life, where you should have been, like, had you not had the eating disorder and you had had the proper support and coping skills, this is not a fault of the person who has an eating disorder, it's just, and it's not something that you can't overcome. It's just, it becomes more difficult because you've had all this time, however long that may be, maybe a period of months, maybe a period of years, where you could have, or, had you not had this issue going on, you would have been feeling the full extent of your nerves, your emotional nerves, and you would have been responding to them appropriately, just as, like, if you went outside in the cold, you would say, oh, I need to put gloves on, or I need to not become overheated, or I need to pay attention to what pain is acceptable and that I can relax and will eventually work itself out, or what pain is not acceptable and I need to pay attention to it. Instead, we almost become hypersensitive to everything because, just like coming out of the cold and the nerves waking out, then we're like suddenly just that horrible feeling of hypersensitivity, and that's really what feeling emotion with an eating disorder, I think, is like when we start to come out of that. And it's scary and it's intense. And eventually you have to come to a point where you realize that if you sit with that emotion and feel that pain, yes, it's going to feel intense, and yes, it's going to be something you're not used to, and yes, you may think that you're going to die through it, and that you want to scream, and that, everything's going to fall apart. But when you really rationally think about it, if you sit through it and you scream, what's really going to happen? Probably nothing. And that's what's scary, because you don't know what's going to happen. But you sit through it and you realize, oh, I'm sitting through it, I'm living through it, and eventually you relax because you hit that wave, and then you come down, and then you feel better, and you feel this relieves, and you feel relieved. It's different than the stoppage relief that the eating disorder momentarily gives you. So that is the purpose of emotion. And I would encourage you to start to recognize that emotional wave and feel it, because that's what part of becoming intuitive with your life is, an emotional development and getting to a place of emotional maturity that will really help you in your recovery. And and if you have a treatment team or friends and support system, this is vital during this process to also bounce things off of them and check in with them and tell them what you're feeling so that you can feel safe through this. So have a good night.